Kings. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat. Otherwise the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank, and then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?"
And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Let's face it, we live in a noisy world, really noisy world. Think about just a common day, just inside our houses, the television drones away, or the dishwasher hums, the boom box booms. In our outside world, the traffic rushes by and roars, the air conditioning units churn away, and the fire engines and police cars screech down with their sirens, and even nature gets into the act of pushing silence away. I mean, birds chirp and dogs bark and wind rushes and rain pounds, and it's just like, when do we actually experience, even in 24 hours, I mean, how much silence is there really? Not a whole lot, even internally. I mean, think about just our internal world. There's these conversations that keep running through our heads and making commentary on everything that goes. There's songs that keep shuffling on infinite feedback loops, and our ears ring, and all those. It's just, when can we just find quiet? In our story this morning, it says that God did not come to Elijah in the roaring, raging fire, or the thundering earthquake, or the tearing wind, but rather in the sound of sheer silence. Now the Hebrew there is rather interesting. It's actually untranslatable. What we translate as sheer silence. Literally the Hebrew reads, finely powdered silence. Finely powdered silence. It's like a silence within a silence. What would that sound like? What would it feel like? Well, many of you know that I'm a big fan of snow. Every beginning of November, I put this sign above my office door, says, "Let it snow," and most people take that as an act of aggression. But I love snow. I mean, think about it. When it snows all night, you could wake up in the morning, and before you even open your eyes, you know how you could already tell it snowed. Because just the way that the snow dampens the sound, it just subtly changes the acoustics of everything around you. And if you get up really early in the morning, before the birds are up and before the traffic has started, and just stand out there in the snow, I mean, just like sub-silence, sub-zero volume. There is that finely powdered stuff all around, outside and inside. Of course, those moments, though, are comparatively rare, even in Nebraska. If we're going to actually find that finely powdered silence, that softly falling snow inside, we really kind of have to find it inside us, develop ways to still things without relying on that external world. And of course, the mystics over time have developed all kinds of techniques to bring inner silence into a person. But quite frankly, especially for the purposes of this morning, I would just feel perfectly content if more of us would just resolve to just be quiet. Just declare ourselves absent once in a while from conversations, absent from television, absent from the boom boxes, and just went quiet to try to be the quiet we seek. Well, a service about how silence helps guide us on our journey doesn't make sense to fill it up with a whole bunch of words. Rebecca is going to help us actually experience maybe a few moments of that silence.
Well, we're going to try. Okay, young friends, do you want to come on up to the chancel? We're going to try an experiment. Yep, we're going to wait for the bubbles to pop up. Okay, good. We have an edge because we already have a couple friends who've done it already today. So I think we've got it this time. Yes, ma'am. Yes. That sounds great. Hi. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Does everybody see the screens with the bubbles? Okay. So here's what should happen when we make sounds. Okay, so just to make sure it's working, we're going to test it out, okay? So in a second, once we give people who are wearing hearing aids, you may want to turn them down right now. We're going to test it out. We're going to see if it works. So I'm going to ask you, yep, you plug them up. Make as much sound as you possibly can so we can see what we do with the bubbles. You should help us. Okay, it works. They work. It's totally working. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to see who can be quiet the longest. Miss Amy's going to pull up her timer, and we're going to see if you can stay quiet longer than them. So while Miss Amy's pulling up her stopwatch, I want to lay down some ground rules. All of the sounds count, right? Coughing, sneezing, farting, rustling your papers, clearing your throat, thinking way too hard, rolling your eyes in the back of your head, click, right? All of these sounds count. So as soon as we say go, we're going to be quiet. And Miss Amy is going to time it until I look at her, which means I heard something, or everybody heard something more likely. Okay, so let's see how long we can do it. What? Depends on how loud you're breathing. Oh! Okay, everybody ready? Get your sounds out. Everybody ready? Everybody ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we have to start over.
Thank you very much.
Okay. That was good to get it out of our system. Okay, ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How far did we make it? 10 seconds! Oh, nice! Excellent. Okay. We have to give them a chance. Shh. We have to give them a chance, right? So we're gonna need to be quiet up here as well because we don't want the balls to move. We don't want to cheat, okay? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna invite you now to do this and see how long you can do it, but I'm gonna be listening. If you are holding a baby or a small child and they make sounds, oh, sorry, they're on your team, okay? Okay, shh. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, there was the baby. Yes. Oh, we got a ringer. Excellent. Okay, we'll try again. We're gonna try again. We got a second chance. Okay, one more time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yes. We totally paid off that baby. How much? Oh, you did it 4 seconds. We won. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, friends. So before, I think there's a group of you who are staying up here, right? There's a group staying up here? No? Everybody goes. Okay, so we're going to head back to our parents. But before we go, let's see if we can't send it off. Let's see if we can't send our children's moment off with a few more bouncing balls. Ready? Everybody's going to need to help us, so it's going to be loud one more time again. So if you have a hearing aid, let's turn them down. Ready? Go! Whoa. Okay, Maddie, stop. Excellent. All right, get out of here. Come on, friends. Good job.
Okay, good luck with the silence later on. The next scripture comes from Genesis, the first chapter. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in God's image. In the image of God, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth."
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
Many of you know that as much as I love snow, I love solitude and silence even more. On my Monday Sabbaths, it's not at all unusual for me to go the entire day without uttering one word other than my dog until Melanie comes home. When I go on study leave, it's not unusual for days to pass before I utter a single word. I found that the more silence I experienced externally and internally, the more my soul just kind of starts to glow, kind of illuminated by the soft glow of the Holy Spirit or by the raging fire of the Holy Spirit. You know, in that illumination, it could be more thrilling than the wildest roller coaster ride, or more comforting than the softest, warmest blanket. I love that silent stuff and the way that God can speak within the silence. But I have to admit that as much as I love that, as much as I find God there, that a far greater percentage of the way I experience God comes not in those moments of sheer silence, but actually when I'm in the midst of other people. And why would that be? Well, I mean, we're all created, the scriptures tell us, in the image and likeness of God. And I doubt that has to do with physical resemblance so much as spiritual resemblance. In fact, I think most of us probably learn more about God through our interactions with people. For instance, when somebody, it's kind of coincidentally, we find this out especially when a loved one passes on. Before every funeral or memorial service, I will gather with the family out in the commons and have a moment of prayer. But before that prayer begins, I'll ask the family to just offer, one or two words that sum up who this person was for them. And there are some words that come up far more often than others. These include words like caring, comforting, loving, always there, fun, generous, true friend, faithful, compassionate, joyful, gracious. These are the words that come up. Which one of these words have nothing to do with God? Indeed, all of them have everything to do with God. And in fact, when we feel like we're abandoned by God or have some reason to be angry or that God's judging and condemning us, those kinds of experiences with other people remind us, they break down those internal stories we're telling into that finely powdered silence and remind us of who this God really is. It's interesting that actually through our interactions with people, even when there are when we experience things that maybe has nothing to do with God, we can still find God in them. For instance, I doubt God is ever lonely, but when lonely people meet other lonely people, they experience community, belonging, a sense of knowing and being known. They experience a sense of God. Or when people who have been bullied find each other. I doubt God bullies, or has been bullied. But when people who have been found to be bullied, they get together, they find empathy, they find compassion together. So even then, we experience God through other people. There's even this oddity that even in unhealthy relationships between people, God can oftentimes be found. For instance, when somebody hurts another person, even intentionally, if that person gives voice to the pain, there are times when it breaks the heart of the person who has hurt that other person. And they start to feel compassion, love for that other. I'm reminded, for instance, in the 1960s, in 1965 especially, in the middle of all this racial tension, how millions of people watched on television those who were trying to cross the bridge in Selma, Alabama, and they saw with their own eyes the brutality that was inflicted on these people, to the point where even people who had been indifferent about the racial tension or even been racist themselves, whose stories, internal stories about other races had propped up a culture of racism, even then when they saw that, something inside just broke open, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people went from indifference or even antagonism to activism on behalf of justice. So even then, God comes through in odd ways in our experience simply of each other, breaking down the stories that bind us and into some form of bondage, into that finely powdered silence, to the point where the Spirit just comes in and fills that void with something new. So as I was working on the first major revision of my book, Gifts of the Dark Wood, I found myself in this terrible quandary. About 200 of you had read the first draft in small groups, and based on the feedback, I came to the sobering conclusion that while about 25% of the people really got it and gave it, high marks, for about 75% of you it went like this. And I was struggling with what to do about that. Well, at this time, I happened to go to a writers' conference in Bend, Oregon, up in the mountains, where they had a number of very famous authors speak about the art of writing. And one of them was Anne Lamott, who I'm a big fan of. She can tell in the most witty and yet wise way about her own dark wood experiences of divorce, single motherhood, depression, all these things that she's experienced. And I went to her lecture with great enthusiasm. And in her lecture, I got very inspired because she was talking about how when she started writing at first, hardly anybody understood what she was talking about. And they urged her to change her voice in those manuscripts. And after holding firm, after even a number of rejections, of course, then her career took off. And she reminded any budding authors in the audience, find your true voice, and once you've found it, hold on with everything you got. Don't change in light of public opinion. I'm like, oh. Well, I had to go see her. After I waited around until the last autograph had been given. I just wanted to ask her about my own book manuscript, and so I waited until that last book had been signed. And just as she was turning to leave, I said, "Oh, Miss Lamott, do you have time for just one quick question?" And from the look on her face, I think she was kind of beyond the point of talking to people, but she nodded, and I wasn't going to miss my opportunity to talk to Anne Lamott. So I told her, I've got this manuscript, and I think it's the best thing I've ever written, and I found my true voice in it. The only problem is about 75% of the people, that they don't understand it. And she looks at me and she says, I asked her, should I hold on to my true voice? She says, oh no, you better revise it. So I headed down the mountains to our family cabin in Bandon, where I had some study leave planned, and I worked and I worked, I revised, I rewrote, but the more I did that, the more the manuscript seemed to just unravel on me, to the point where it just seemed to me to be like this big pile of useless garbage. And I couldn't make head, I was just so lost in it. I remember distinctly going out for a walk one morning, just trying to clear my head, and I was really down. I couldn't even take a good selfie that morning. And I was walking beside a stream on the property, and I just stopped and broke down, just sobbing and praying. God, can you take away at least this pain that I'm feeling? Can you, or better yet, could you just tell me to forget about this manuscript altogether and move on to other things? Can you tell me something that will help? Silence. Sheer silence. And not the kind in which Elijah heard God's voice. So I changed tactics. Tried the guilt approach. I've worked so hard on this manuscript for you. You're the one who told me to write in the beginning with, don't let me flail like this. Nothing. Well, then I began to experience an emotion that welled up within me that was quite new. It was anger, quite frankly. And I told God, if you're not going to speak to me, maybe the forest will. And I knew what I wanted to do. I needed to go to this place on our property that I'd actually never walked into before, hadn't walked into before, because it's basically impenetrable. It's this big ravine, and the brush and the trees are so dense that you can't really get in. And if you do walk down to the bottom of that ravine, you tell it's just really swampy and full of thorny bushes and stuff. And I'd never wanted to go there. But at this point, I was so lonely, feeling so alienated from my work and my God and everything. I just wanted to go to a place that looked on the outside like I was feeling on the inside, and maybe just take some companionship from that. And so I made my way to this ravine and I stood on the top of the hill and then got down on literally had to get down on my belly and squirm through about 12 yards of just brush and bushes until I could finally get back on my hands and knees and crawl for a bit, and then finally on my feet. And when I made it down to the bottom of that ravine, it was exactly as I had pictured it. It was swampy. It was full of thorny bushes. And I could not make my way. I couldn't even tell which way to go to get to the other side of the ravine. And I thought, this totally feels like I feel. So if you got any word for me now, God? Yeah. Of course, nothing. So I kind of wandered in circles and finally made my way. I could see sunlight penetrating the edge of the trees. I knew I was close to breaking through that forest. But just as I got to the top of the rise and just about to make my way into sunny freedom, I looked down to my right, and what I saw there absolutely took my breath away. It was the largest patch of chanterelle mushrooms I've ever seen. Now, I love chanterelles. And every time I go to Oregon, if it's the right time of year, I spend a good amount of time searching for these delicious, beautiful mushrooms. And I rarely find them. And if I do, maybe I find a half a pound or so. But in this patch, there must have been 5 or 6 pounds of chanterelle mushrooms. And in that stillness of just beholding this glory, it's like the mushrooms themselves spoke. Eric, don't be discouraged. Yeah, you've got some muck and mire in your book, but it's also full of chanterelles if you'll look, if you'll just notice. Just take those stories and insights that are there and pull them out and just put them all in front of you, and you will find a coherent thread through them. If you just arrange those in that order, and you'll find a book that's coherent to others. So I did what I was told. Pulled those things out, arranged them, and sure enough, I found my way through that book. And to this day, I consider that book to be the best book I've ever written. I think that we hear God's voice when we just shut up a bit and we get silent, we absent ourselves from the conversations, and there's times when just in that sheer silence alone, externally and internally, we hear the voice. There's other times when just through our interactions with people and us being quiet and just interacting with them, we experience the voice of God. And there's still other times, maybe when our heart breaks and we just get out into nature and our heart interacts with the heart of God's creation, that still small voice, that finely powdered silence of God comes to us in surprising ways. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, how sometimes God speaks loudest when all is silent. Communion Sunday, I invite you to remind ourselves of who we are and whose we are. Next slide, please. We are an open and affirming family of faith, welcoming all to God's table of love and acceptance. We are diverse, yet united by Christ's example. We care for one another, support one another, and challenge one another to become all that God creates us to be. We work together to nurture our community and to promote peace and justice in our conflicted world.